Good morning. This is Aida Moreno, and this is my presentation for Exercise 10, Contemporary World. So today we're going to talk about the Cold War, which is a very important event that happened after World War II. Now, here is a short description with important dates of this movement event, but I would like to explain it myself. So first of all, let's position ourselves at the end of the World War II. In 1945, when on April 3rd, Hitler committed suicide, and then all the German army had to surrender to the forces of the Allies. And now the Japan also surrendered later on, but it's important to mention that the attack to Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the atomic bomb by the US was a very important factor that later on will lead to the Cold War. So now that the war is finally over, the Allies got together to discuss and divide Germany into zones, for each ally, one for the Americans, one for the USSR, one for the British, and for France. This took place in the city of Jalta. Then, the Western zones kinda got together and standardized their government policies and established capitalism. Remember this term because it is important. While on the eastern part, the USSR established communism. And to this, let's add that at the time, thanks to World War II, the US and the USSR were the main powers ruling the world, basically. But what set the lead team was the attack of the atomic bomb by US. See, I told you to remember it. Since it sent a message that they were the strongest, to which the USSR disagreed. And also, when the Allies made the negotiation to the future of Germany, US spoke from a position of privilege, since they knew they were at the top, and therefore the USSR couldn't get what they wanted with Germany. And that's how the ties started. Then, in 1947, the US established a policy of containment that restricted the USSR power in the world. And so on, the USSR also wanted to have an atomic bomb, and from that point on, a race began between the US and the USSR with the nuclear weapons and space projects. And also, to have a better development, the US created the Operation Paperclip in 1946, which calls German scientists to work for them in the name of science. And the USSR will then do the same. Although it's worth saying that at first the USSR wasn't really having success, and this is where the system of spies started. The USSR infiltrated spies in the US to get their information of the atomic bomb. And on the other hand, the US sent spies to the USSR and within the country because they wanted to prevent the communism to spread. Examples of these spies are Foch and Theodore Hall. They worked for the USSR and were discovered by the US government. Then, in 1949, the USA created the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that was basically a military alliance between Canada and the UK and other Western European countries, and it sought to bring defense to every member state attacked by other power, meaning the USSR. Finally, this war ended in 1991, when the USSR dissolved itself. So this is like a general description of what happened in the Cold War. So now I would like to explain what the communism and capitalism was. The capitalism was an economic and political system where business or private individuals own capital goods and control property according to their interests. Also, the services and production of goods depended on the demand and supply in the market where the prices are freely set to benefit the interests of society. This is also known as market economy. The objective of capitalism is to basically motivate to produce profit. And also, in the free market, private individuals are free to choose where to invest their money on. what to produce or sell, and its prices. Now, on the other hand, we have socialism, that is also an economical and political system, but this one is more focused on collective ownership and property of the means of production, meaning tools, factory, machinery, to produce goods beneficial to the human needs. This system is totally opposite to capitalism. Also, this system is based on the idea that we as individuals do not work alone, that we must live in cooperation with the others, which means that if someone produces something, it's not only for him, it's for everyone. Thus, the decision of the production and distribution are made by the government, and sometimes it tends to be authoritarian, but it's supposed to make things equal for everyone. Finally, we're going to analyze some interviews that I did to persons, maybe not experts on the topic, but that knew about it. So the first question was, what countries were the world leaders during this time? Person 1, which is my mom, she's 50 years old, and her name is Zulma Moreno Reyes. So her answer was Truman in the US and Nikita in the USSR. And the person 2 is my aunt, she's 56 years old, and her name is Irene. And her answer was Harry S. Truman for the US and Nikita Khrushchev for the USSR. I'm sorry if that wasn't correct pronunciated, but we do what we can. Then the second question was, why did countries who were allies during the war become enemies afterward? Person 1 said that they had ties of power since the beginning. It's just that they got together during the war to fight a common enemy, which is totally right. And person 2 says because of their economic interests, capitalism and communism, which is also right. The third question was, where did the Cold War take place? And the first person said in Europe mainly, and the second between Russia and the US and their allies, meaning the OTAN, for the US. The fourth is, what opinion did the general public have of the Cold War? Person 1 said that they weren't fully recovered from the war and they were scared of possible attacks with nuclear bombs, which is totally right because both were threatening the other with the atomic bombs. So yeah. Person 2 said that they were really scared and made shelters in the US because the propaganda was a lot and they were brainwashed that if they even consider being a communist, they will lose everything. Then the next question is, what type of weapons did the two world powers have at their disposal? And the answer for person number 1 is nuclear bombs, like the atomic bomb. And for person 2, she said mainly nuclear and space weapons, which, as I was saying at the beginning, is true because in the Cold War is where it started the race of developments in weapons and space stuff. Now, the following question is, how did the Cold War affected our modern world? Person 1 said that it was an important step to establish capitalism around the world, which is very true because right now we live in a capitalist country world mainly. And person 2 said that in the economic aspects in the US blocked the way of communist and standardized capitalism for everyone, which is basically the same as person 1. Now, the next question is, what do you think would have happened if the US wouldn't have dropped the atomic bomb? Person 1 says that someone would eventually have done it because they had technology, and maybe if that someone would have been the USSR, the communism would have won. And that's true because, well, I think it's true because that event marked the power of the country over the world. Then person 2 said that the war would have inevitably ended and it was just a strategic move to prove their power for the US. Now, who the next question is, who do you agree with the most? The US or the USSR? Person 1 says she agrees with capitalism the most but still thinks that it has its pros and cons. And person 2 says with neither because she thinks that they shouldn't impose economic nor political ideals. Which is true, but person 1 is also true because we live in a capitalist country and we can see and live all the pros and cons that it has. So as you saw in this interview, the answers were pretty much the same, and they were correct according to the story and the description we gave at the beginning. And it is interesting how people who lived near that event were affected and what they think about it. So that is it for today. Thank you for your attention. Have a great day.